Welcome back to Between Sessions. My name is Ebony Harris.
And I'm Elisa Bokeen, and we are two brown chicks changing the face of therapy on both sides of the couch.
It was a delay. I was like, I said it that time. Like, I did it right. But it was a delay, and I was like, did she hear me get started? So, welcome back. I swear, once these COVID times is over, it's going to be great. It's going to be so awesome to be in the same room and to be able to feed off of energy and all of that fun stuff. But we appreciate y'all for joining us this week. We are going to talk about what's normal in therapy. We're starting a new series where we will just have conversations about, is that normal? Is this normal? I went to therapy and this happened. Is that normal? Because that is something that I feel like a lot of people struggle with, where they feel like they're not doing it right. And so, or there's something wrong. Is my therapist doing the right job? Because this what happened after therapy, or things like that. So we'll be talking about different topics regarding, is that normal or not? So today we're going to talk about, I went to therapy, but I still struggle. Is that normal? Because we have these ideas of like what's supposed to happen after you're done with therapy or after your first session in therapy. Like we have this whole expectation, and that kind of, makes you kind of question, like, am I supposed to be doing this? Is this the way it's supposed to be? So what is the answer to the question? Is it normal to struggle once I've been doing therapy?
Yes.
She's shaking her head. Yes, it is.
So the answer is yes, it is normal that you are still struggling, because I think that's the misconception that we're going to go to therapy and then everything is just going to be better after that. I'm going to be healed, which means I won't have problems. I'll have all the insight that I need, all the tools, and life will be good all the time.
Right. It's here. especially if you have what if your therapist graduated you, right? If they're like, hey, like, you're doing amazing, I think it's time for us to separate. You can always come back when you need me, but I think you can handle this on your own. And then the next week you have something happen in life. That could be very confusing, no. Right? The therapist didn't know what they were talking about. I need to be there every single week. And the reality is, therapy does not stop life from happening. And I think that's why sometimes we get confused, because we think of struggling as we're doing something wrong. And that's not necessarily the case. Like, you can be struggling because of life. You can be struggling because of relationships. You can be struggling because of work. You could be struggling because today I was sick, and so I was having a hard time, So I think when we think of therapy, and especially therapy ending or being in therapy, we have this certain idea of what a healed person looks like. Like, we think we know, this is where I need to be healed. And that sometimes isn't the case. So what do you think people think of when they think of a healed person? When they think of someone who has been to therapy and graduated and now they are perfect. What is that?
Perfect. Yes. I think people think that you're not going to get upset anymore, that you're not going to get triggered anymore. Because sometimes I will hear that, it's like, I'm still getting triggered. Right. And so it could be that the things that triggered you before may still trigger you. And we talk a lot about on a scale, right? Like, maybe before, when it would trigger you, it would set you off on a 10. And now it might set you off like on a 3 or a 4. And so that's still progress. So sometimes people think, I'm not going to get triggered anymore. No, you may still get triggered. It just means that you, one, have more awareness of your triggers. You may know how to manage the emotions that come up now when you're triggered, so that the triggers don't take over you, right? Like, you're essentially still in control of you.
Yeah. I think it's definitely when you think of someone that's healed. And I will even say I fall victim to this sometimes when it comes to social media, right? Like, there are some certain people on social media, I'm like, man, they just look like they have their life together. Like, so it may not be healed from a mental health perspective, but it's just like, I want to be an adult like that person one day. Like, I want to be able to be doing yoga on the beach and be,
Right.
you know, every morning I start with like my prayers and my meditation, and I'm
Right.
working out, and I get all these things that, like, you just have this idea of like, this is what it looks like.
Right.
Everything
Right. They're
they
eating.
post is very zen and very calm.
Yeah.
Were you gonna say?
Drinking their juice, eating
Right.
granola,
Mm-hmm.
like all day long, and they're full after that. And,
Right. They're always dressed
they,
so casual, and their hair is just like out and free, but it always looks so perfectly done. Like, that is what healed looks like. Like, life is just
right.
easy.
Right.
And that is not the case. It's truly not. It is, healing is an ongoing process. And that's a big part of it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
can you be healed? Sorry, I just realized I look weird. Can you be healed from things that have happened? Definitely. And can you, you know, but we still have the residual of things, right? And so that means that although I may have been able to kind of get past trauma or I've worked through a lot of my trauma or things that have happened, that doesn't mean that every time you have a new experience, it's like, oh, that doesn't matter for me anymore. It doesn't impact me. And like Elisa said,
Mm-hmm.
it may not impact you on the same scale. It may even be, it takes 3 times for somebody to say something that typically would trigger you on the first time, right? And so I hear that a lot, where it's like, well, I was able to stay calm, or I was able to do this, but then that 4th time
Mm-hmm.
I blew up. So clearly I'm still broken. And it's like, wait, can
Mm-hmm.
we acknowledge that that wouldn't have happened
Yeah.
before? That is
Yeah.
progress, and that's you growing. And you're allowed to react when somebody keeps poking at something, you know, when they keep regard,
Mm-hmm.
because I, like I've said before, I often use that analogy of like the broken arm that's not quite fully healed. So if somebody runs into you the
Mm-hmm.
wrong way, then it hurts a little bit. Like, it's still tender, it's still sore, even though it's healed, it just didn't heal properly.
Right.
But even if you don't have a broken bone and somebody keeps poking, eventually that piece is going to get sore and agitated. So
Right.
reacting to that is different from when you would just react based on that soreness.
Yeah.
So some things are just normal human behavior, but because we want to be in this zen like place, then it makes it very difficult
Mm-hmm.
for us to like accept that we have the ups and downs of everybody else, and we still can be, have went through therapy and have went through our healing process and still be going through our healing process. So
Right. And I'm even thinking of it from the perspective of, let's say you go to work, let's work. Let's say you go to therapy and you work
work.
on the types of relationships. It is work, yes.
Right.
But let's say you're working on your relationship patterns. And so you realize that this is your relationship pattern, this is the type of partner you're drawn to, and this is why you've had issues. Okay. And then you start to choose differently. And so now you're maybe choosing partners who are not as problematic as the ones as before. That doesn't mean you're not going to have challenges in that relationship,
Mm.
right? Like, it doesn't mean that because you have challenges in this relationship that therapy didn't work because you still have relationship challenges.
Yeah.
It's just it's not going to exempt you from being human, and part of being
Mm-hmm.
human and the human experience is we have frustrations, we have discomfort, we have challenges, and we say it all the time, it's in those challenges and in that discomfort that we continue to grow. So if that's kind of the point to life, is that we continue to evolve and grow, then
Mm-hmm.
that means we're going to face that regularly throughout our lives. Again, it's more that we will now be able to manage those challenges in a different way.
Right, exactly. And I think because we have such an idea of what it's supposed to look like, then it makes it where we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure sometimes. Sometimes we're
Mm-hmm.
setting ourselves up to not either want to go through with the process of even going to therapy, or we feel like, if therapy is supposed to look this way, then is it really working? If I'm supposed
Mm-hmm.
to feel this calm, zen, pers- uh, persona or whatever all the time, if I'm supposed to
Mm-hmm.
be in this space, this positive, high energy space all the time, and I'm not, then it can feel like, oh, okay, therapy isn't working. And so you
Right.
have to get realistic about what your journey looks like.
And I would say also, it's it's a lot easier to feel that when you're in the therapist's office, right? Like I'm thinking of times where I've had my own sessions with my own therapist, and I'm like, yes, I'm centered.
I got it together.
I have this insight, and then I leave the office, and then here's Houston traffic, and people calling my phone, and it's like, oof, right? So I think it's that also when you're in the therapist's room and you're practicing some of what you're learning, and then you have to apply it outside of the office. It's tough. It is hard, but again, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have those tendencies, to go back to how you were before. Because for a lot of us, we come to therapy at a certain point of our lives, but it could have been that many, many, many years that we lived life a different way. So breaking some of those habits can be really difficult.
Right. It's hard. It's not now that I have this information, now I know what to do.
Right.
It takes time. It's like the one thing about like reading like nonfiction books. If you're reading a book about business, like it's one thing to read the book and be like, oh, okay, yes, these concepts make sense and da. But until you start applying it, all you do is now just have the information about the concepts. I often tell my clients the first thing you're going to do is you're going to start to recognize it in your life. Right? You're going to start to recognize times, and it'll be after the fact. It won't be before. It'll be after the fact of like, oh, that's one of those things she was talking about, right? That's how I'm escalating this situation, or that's how I'm not making sure I enforce my own boundaries, but then I get upset because they're not respecting my boundaries. Like you start to recognize it after the fact. Then you start to recognize it a little bit closer to the situation. And then maybe even while you're in the middle of it, you're like, oh, wait, I'm doing that, And so, but it takes time to get there for you to be able to see a situation coming and completely change the way you interact with that situation. It takes time. It takes practice. You have to learn how to apply it. And so to have that belief that as soon as you walk out the therapy room, because while you were sitting there, you had all these epiphanies and you made all these connections and you're like, yes, that does make sense. And this is why I do that. And I get it. And to think that as soon as you get home, it's like, okay, I'm never going to fight with anybody again. It's just
right.
It's unfortunate. It's not how it works. So the struggle will be there. You will have times when life happens. You will have times when it feels like, because feelings aren't facts. So when it feels like you haven't made as much progress as you would have liked to, or you haven't made any progress at all, that doesn't mean that that's true, number one. But number two, making progress is a continual thing. Like you're continuing to work on it. And so it's not a one-stop shop. Like just because you handled this situation very well a week ago doesn't mean the next time you're going to handle it just as well. And so I think a big part of that is understanding and allowing yourself grace. I say that all the time. I don't know when that became my phrase, but all of a sudden being graceful for yourself, allowing yourself grace has become such a thing. Because I think it's just something we don't do at all.
And especially this year.
Yeah.
It's hard. Yes, it's hard. But I think this year, if you've never developed grace for yourself before, this was the year to develop it, because we've just kind of been getting hit from every angle. Right. Yeah. And so I think that's another thing, just even 2020. So what does a healed person look like in 2020? Right. So maybe you've gone to therapy and all this, and then 2020 has been a challenging year, to say the least, right? But again, it goes back to sometimes I think what we have to do is think about how might we have handled it prior to therapy, right? So maybe you're still struggling right now, but it's kind of like what you said before. How might you have handled, let's say you're somebody who's struggled with social anxiety, right? And now this pandemic hits, right? And you go out in public, and, I think everybody's anxiety going out is at an all-time high. So again, sometimes it's not a matter of, that's the thing. I think healing doesn't mean there's a perfected version of you.
Right.
Right. Because I think that's what we associate with healing. Oh, that's a healed person, so it's perfect. Just like if the arm, we want the arm to be healed, we want it to go to perfect or
Right.
completely restored, like there was no damage.
Right.
And I don't think that we can get there, right? Like it's like if you have a great wonderful car and it's been in a car accident, it's never going to fully be the same, but that's okay, right? Like that's okay. So I think if we try to um if we think of ourselves as once we're healed, it's going to be like the pain never happened, or the abuse never happened, or the heartbreak never happened. I think that sets us up for failure. But it's okay, because what happens is we learn to create a new life with new meaning of how do I take these experiences that happen to me, um, and who am I after going through that, and who am I now that I'm still here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not having um to separate myself fully from those experiences, where I think before, prior to healing, I can't coexist with those
Right.
experiences. I can't coexist with that part of me that went through that. So healing is more of this mending and bridging than it is, again, of this like incredibly pristine version that there's no cracks or adjustments. And that's okay, right? Like that's okay, because I think that's the part that gives us character. That's the part
Right.
that gives us wisdom. That's the part that gives us insight. That's also part of the human experience.
I like that last part, because I feel like sometimes we think therapy erases, and truly therapy
Mm-hmm.
helps us learn from. And so it's not
Right.
necessarily that you need to get rid of those things that have happened, or you need to pretend like they didn't happen, or try to completely erase them from your mind. It's, I had these
Mm-hmm.
experiences and they did impact me, and maybe they impact me. It felt like they impacted me in these very negative ways. But what can I learn from that? And what do I learn about myself? And what do I learn about how I handle stress? And then being able to grow from that space, as opposed to let's just get rid of it. And so that's why
Yeah.
when it comes to therapy, there isn't this like, oh, okay, the things that have happened to you will no longer impact you ever in life. Like, no, some things
Mm-hmm.
should. Some things you
Mm-hmm.
should be. It
Mm-hmm.
has made you the human you are now. It has made you more aware. It's made you more insightful. It's made you more caring, depending on what happened. And that's okay. Like, it's no need to like try to completely take that away from you. And I get it. Like, because
Mm-hmm.
I've heard the comments of, if you grew up in a household where maybe you had a critical parent or something like that, and then as an adult you've become a successful adult, and it's like, well, I made you that way. Like, if I wasn't so hard on you, and it's like, well, I didn't
Mm-hmm.
need that to be this. Like, I didn't need
Right.
that
Right.
part to be this. But also now I know, therapy helps you now understand, okay, so if you had a critical parent, how are you talking to yourself? Right. And is
Mm-hmm.
that still helpful to you? And how do you shift that? And what do you need? And how do you feel loved and all of that? So yes, while those experiences weren't great, and they impacted you in a negative way, you can also learn from that and learn more about yourself. And I think a big thing is understanding or paying attention to how your mind shifts and how your thinking shifts. Because sometimes when we
Mm-hmm.
don't see it in our outside world, because maybe you do feel like you're finding yourself in a situation that's continuously having struggle, how do you process it differently than you may have before?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before
Yeah.
it was, the world is attacking me, and now it may be, I can attack the world. Like, I can now deal with whatever the
Right.
world brings me. So even if there is a little bit of like, oh, there's always something going on, because there is, because it's life and that's what it is. But how do you now
Yeah.
process it differently? And that's another way to kind of look at struggle, or the fact that after therapy things are still happening. Like, yes, they are, but are you now being able to approach them in a completely different way than you did before? So
Mm-hmm. So really, I think, what does a healed person look like? And I believe that a healed person is an empowered person, right? So you come out of this process, you come out of this experience, and you're still empowered, right? There's that, because that's what trauma does to us. That's what abuse is. We're disempowered. And so to be able to go through that process where you're disempowered, and you go through what you go through, and then to come out of it empowered, and maybe that empowerment is through the insight that you've gained, the wisdom that you've gained, the tools that you gain, whatever it is, or just the resilience that you gain in knowing that you've gone through the process and that you've taken your power back. So I think maybe that's the easiest way to think of it. Empowered, it doesn't mean I'm exempt, and it doesn't mean that I'm numb to what goes on around me. It just means I just know that what's going to come my way, I'm going to figure out how to deal with it.
Yeah. I think of a healed person as a person that's always willing to learn from any situation they're given. And so they're open to change, and are open to learn, and are open to knowing that you don't know everything. I think that's extremely hard to get to sometimes. A lot of times we feel like, we know everything that needs to be known, especially about our lives and about the people that we interact with. But to be able to look at every situation and any struggle that you may face as, okay, so what can I get from this? How can I view this differently? What are the reasons why this may have happened, to be able to really learn from everything, and always seeking to learn from things, as opposed to just kind of shutting down when bad things happen. I think that's helpful. So yeah, empowered and a learning person is what it actually looks like to go to therapy and to have successful therapy. It does not mean that you're not going to struggle anymore. Sorry. All right.
Sorry.
Thank y'all so much for joining us. Make sure you follow us across social media, Melanin and Mental Health, Melanin Health on Twitter, and head over to melaninandmentalhealth.com. Sign up for the directory. If you are a clinician, people are looking for you. Go sign up. And also, if you want to listen to previous podcasts, check that out. And of course, the merchandise is there. So make sure you check that out as well. I think that's all. So we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Thank you.